Hi guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Evelyn Jerry, and this is the Holistic Wellbeing with Evelyn Jerry. I am a mental health and wellness practitioner, and I am joined together with Dr. Daniel Claiborne. Welcome. Would you mind saying hi to the people?
Hello, I'm happy to be here again.
Maybe you can tell us more about yourself.
Yes.
How was your week? Um,
Um, okay. Yes, I really have missed our program since the first one because it was so much fun. And I'm looking forward to doing these every other week because, of course, I spent my whole life working with people trying to achieve mental health. And I really enjoyed writing the article that we're basing our program today on, which is signs of mentally healthy people, what mentally healthy people do, and how we can recognize in ourselves if we're acting in a mentally healthy way. So it's a really one of my favorite topics. And Evelyn and I were talking ahead of time, and we thought it would be very important to mention that with each of our topics as we go along, with almost all of them, there will be an article that's available that if people want to see it online or receive a copy, they can. And you can read it ahead of the time we do our shows, or you can watch the shows first and read the article later. But also, Evelyn and I were talking about how important it is for all of you to send us questions or reactions or um, suggestions about further topics or questions about the topic we've already had. We really want to interact with you all. At first, we're just broadcasting our own ideas, but as time
yeah.
goes on, we really want it to be a cooperative venture with our ideas and your questions and and what you're interested in hearing. That's also especially important for me because I am a psychologist here in the United States, but I and some of the principles are of mental health are the same everywhere, but some things are different. And I'm not an expert on mental health in Africa or Kenya. And so I'll be needing guidance from all of our watchers and participants as we go along as to what we should focus on. And so that'll be real important to help me uh, be more um, tuned in to what your interests are and what the concerns are of people in Nairobi and Kenya.
I think that's amazing. I read your article, and quite honestly, I don't think I got 100% in your checklist. And I'm sure a lot of people are feeling that way. And quite honestly, it's easy to feel as though you as though like you're really slacking off when it comes to mental health. But that's the reason as to why we are here. We are all trying to become healthier mentally, and just remember that no one is perfect,
Mhm. Yeah, I
even the
think that
the body is not
these
perfect.
that's a really good point, Evelyn. I think these points that we're going to be talking about today and maybe next time I think of them as aspirational. They're things we
Mhm.
are shooting for. They're
Yeah,
not things we already have acquired and we're finished. Um,
yeah.
I think of um, our whole life in each person's life is like a work of art. And
Yeah.
so we're working on this work of art every day of our life. And then the day we die, it's finished. And
Yeah.
so we're always improving and solving problems and slipping back and then coming forward again. And so, yes, as we talk about our list of mentally healthy qualities, they're not something we expect every person to have all the time.
Mhm. Maybe you can tell us more about why is it important for people to know what is on the checklist and how to check. Why is this checklist really important?
Well, I think it's, I mean, we all know we want to be healthier and happier and have less conflict and be successful. And but most people haven't taken the time or to really uh, look at that and know like, well, what are the pieces of that specifically? What It's like a recipe of ingredients, and we all know we want to have a nice cake, but we don't know exactly all the ingredients that go into that cake. And it's real informative to know. And then, like you mentioned, it also gives us kind of a checklist that from time to time we can look at that and see where are we not doing so well. And that way we
Yeah.
know what we can work on. I think in the future, there's another checklist we might have that how do we know when our relationships are healthy? And
Yeah,
that
I
would
think
be
that's really important as
another
well.
kind of checklist that we can do later in a later show.
Yeah. So without further ado, we'll go and dive right into the checklist, and let's start with the science of mental health. Um, Dr. Claiborne, would you like to take us through the science of mental health?
Sure. When I was writing this article, first of all, I had to think of, well, what are the signs of mental health? And
Mhm.
so the first things I thought of were kind of the sort of the broad things that we notice in people. And of course, one of them would be the lack of having a mental disorder or
Mhm.
a cognitive disorder. So, of course, that would be an important sign of mental health, not having a major diagnosable disorder. But the other
Yeah.
things I thought of were, and there it's on our our checklist. The first one I thought of was a contentment with ourselves. Some people think of life as an effort to try to be happy, but happy, in my opinion, comes once in a while. But what it's more realistic to aspire to is contentment and just a feeling of satisfaction that we can't have all the time. But
Yeah.
that's more realistic to try to strive for. So that's the first one I put on the list.
And I
And
think that's really hard. It's really hard for, especially like the new generation that we are in, the millennials and the Gen Zs. Like, we're always striving for something new, something better, and how to improve, how to get the better thing, the better job, the better car, and living a better life. We want people to see us living a way better life than the others. And I think we are forgetting how important peace is, and how important it is to be contented with what we have and where we are at in life. And also it means that we, like, when you're contented with what you have and where you are at in life, you are at you're also appreciating the process it takes to actually get some of these things that we are really aspiring to have, and we don't end up enjoying the process.
I think that's very well said. Um, and uh, even in my generation in the United States, it was exactly as you mentioned, striving to have the better life and the better car and the more money. And um, so you're right. Now we can't be content every day with where we are in life, but maybe
Yeah,
content with what we tried to do that day. So
yeah,
we
I
think
think it's really
contentment and the
important.
peaceful feeling sometimes can be just momentary, and within a certain day, we can still
Yeah,
be not completely content with where we are in life, and so we are striving for something better.
mhm,
But yeah, I think you said that very well.
yeah. So check the next sign of mental health, according to your article, is sense of meaning and purpose in life. Having a sense of meaning and purpose in life.
And
So
here again, yeah, that was the second thing that came to my mind when I wrote that article. And here again, it doesn't mean just a large overarching purpose, but even that day, I may have many little purposes or little things that give me meaning. Whereas where I'm kind to someone, or I offer help to somebody, or I eat a good diet for myself, or little things, little building blocks are important, not just a big meaning or a big purpose in life, although it's nice to have some idea of what some of our bigger purposes are.
Yeah.
Um,
I can maybe share like I one of the my goals this year is to try and complain less. I noticed that I noticed like I love complaining.
maybe it's your hobby.
I wouldn't say that, but I don't know why I didn't realize it, but I noticed that I like my first I like whining about the problem, and it is important to think about the solutions first. So one of my goals this year is to ensure that I like complain less.
Uh,
So if something happens, like a problem happens or something comes up and I realize that I did not complain, that's an achievement.
you
And
know,
I went directly to solution, and so solving the problem, that's to me is an accomplishment.
yes, I think that's a really good goal.
Yeah.
Um, Sometimes, in pursuing a goal, we can also think about somebody who already has achieved this goal. How would they act? So, in some situations, you might think, "Gosh, I feel like complaining." But if I were a person who didn't complain, what would I do? And then that may give you kind of an alternative. And
Yeah.
instead of complaining, oh, I see, I could get more information, or I could express my view to someone, or I could, it gives you an alternative. I like that. That's a very good goal. I
You know what challenged me to having that goal? Um, Last year I came across this lesson that this mental health teacher was talking about. There are two different kinds of people. There are people who are victims. They like the whole victim. I don't remember exactly what there's a certain triangle. Like there's the victim, there's the offender, and then there's the hero.
Mhm.
And a lot of us live in that dynamic.
Right.
And apparently, there's a different dynamic whereby there is the problem solver, there is um, the guy who comes up with the solution, the guy who creates, like that's a whole different dynamics. The guy that provides solutions. I think I've said that before. Yeah. So apparently, there are two different dynamics, but a lot of us live in the dynamic where there has to be the evil guy, there has to be the hero, and there has to be the victim. So a lot of us live in a world where like I am a victim, I need a hero to help me fight the bad guy.
Uh,
So you're constantly complaining about the bad guy, and you're also complaining so that the hero can help you, something like that. And that's why like your mind never goes straight to, okay, this problem is solvable, I can actually solve this, I can actually, do something about this. What if I don't know how to do it, who knows how to do it, like finding solutions here and there.
I really like the way you put that. And sometimes we inherit a sort of an outlook from our family, or sometimes even our culture, that promotes being more victim like or helpless or complaining or um, as a matter of fact, many of the unhealthy things that we find ourselves doing, we didn't invent them. We saw them in other
Yeah.
people and our own families sometimes growing up, and that's how we came into them. But as you point out, we can try to get out of those
Yeah.
models, those
And that
ways.
goes for, like I used to think that it depends with the kind of problem. Like if your problem is big enough, like you're allowed to be a victim. And I thought that now that will make you, I don't know, like will give you a pass to complain. But complaining actually adds on to the problem instead of
Yes,
helping.
yes.
So it doesn't matter like what problem you are going through, like be like do not agree to be a victim. Like make sure that you're the person who comes up with solutions. It doesn't matter what the problem is, be this the problem solver. And if there's no solution, create one or
One of
find.
the things that to look out for when you're doing that, which I really appreciate how you're saying that. One thing to look out for is the feeling inside that something isn't fair. And
Yeah.
we run into that a lot. A lot of times we feel something isn't fair, but it's really better not to go down that path because fairness is a slippery slope. It life isn't fair, and there's no rule book that said it should be fair. And so if we start thinking in terms of fairness or injustice in a personal way, it leads us into the victim like thinking that you're mentioning. Anyway, those are good ideas. Those are really good ideas. The next thing I thought of when I was writing this article that healthy people can do, not all the time, but in general, is the ability to empathize and bond with others. Some people call it attachment. The ability to feel what the other person might be feeling, and also to um, be able to bond with another person or animal. Sometimes in my practice, I've worked with people who have never been attached to any person or even a pet or an animal. They just don't have that understanding of what that feels like. So healthy people definitely have had attachments and can
Mhm.
form attachments. I thought that
And
was
I
an
don't
important one.
know why, but um, I have met people who have a hard time empathizing or feeling how other people are feeling. And you have to really explain. And even you can try explaining to them, but they will not understand at
Hmm.
all. And they're the kind of people who end up hurting people because they are more self-involved because they will not think about how will this affect the other person
Hmm.
and all that.
What I
So what would you say about people like that?
what I have found with people who are very self-centered is if they are willing to understand that problem, you can actually learn to do empathy if you know
Really?
that it's important and you can practice it. At first, you may not be very good at it, but once you realize what it is, first of all, and that it's very important, not to the happiness of other people, but to your own happiness. I've had people who've really learned to become more empathic. And so it's not just born into us. Uh,
Mhm.
some some of it, I mean, is a little bit genetic, but even those of us who didn't start off having much empathy can really learn to be more empathic once we understand that it's important. So I don't give up on people who are not very empathic.
Wow, I've never thought of it that way. Um, so I came across this statement that says that most narcissistic people um, do not feel empathy; they are apathetic, and the probability of them getting out of that is really hard. What do you think of that?
I think that's right. I mean, I think most very self-centered, highly narcissistic people um, are don't change much. The people that I've seen in my practice who are that way are usually brought in by their spouse or partner who realizes the problem.
Mm-hmm.
But over the years, I have had a number of people who are very self-focused and narcissistic who, when they realized how that was harming their own life, they actually could make changes. So,
And is that possible for them to make changes?
what was that, Evelyn?
Is it possible for a narcissistic person to change?
Yes, I definitely think so. But only if they realize how it's harming themselves. If you just point out to them how their narcissism harms others, they don't care. But if you point out how being narcissistic is limiting their own enjoyment of life and their relationships and their successes, and then that makes sense to them. And so, in a way,
I
you
think I
use
would like us to have like a full session about narcissistic people.
right.
I think I don't know. I find them really fascinating um because a lot of people have been using that word, but I don't think they really understand what it means.
Mhm.
I think we need another session, a full session where we can discuss narcissism and how it affects people, and even to learn that someone can actually change,
Right.
and even what are those points that someone can use to show that a narcissistic
Yeah.
person is limiting their lives, like those specific points that people
Mhm.
can
Mhm.
talk to, because we can't reach every single person, but maybe someone can learn from this particular show.
Sure. And we do have one article on narcissistic personality disorder that if we have a show dedicated to that, we'll make that article available and ahead of time, and
Mhm.
people can see that. And yeah, that would be a whole topic in itself. Yes.
I think that's amazing. Thank you.
Okay. The next one on our big overall broad characteristics list is mentally healthy people make decisions rationally. Not
What do
completely
you mean by
and
that?
not always, but they are realistic. They are logical in their decision making. They gather information, and their decisions aren't prejudiced in one direction or another. And they seek information. They're open to changing their mind about
Mm-hmm.
things. Anything you would consider reasonable or rational. Um, that's how we are when we're mentally healthy. That's how we make more of our decisions. Not that emotions don't come into it, they
Mm-hmm.
do, but then the decision though is made in terms of realistic possibilities and possible outcomes of our decision. And one part of that is
Mm-hmm.
people who try to make rational decisions usually ask for the opinions of other people along the way just to make sure they're not missing something. And one good example of this is with our kids. They're not very good at rational decision making. And so as parents, we, with our, let's say, teenagers, they're about to make a decision about, let's say, quitting the team or staying on the team. And they can maybe
Mm-hmm.
only think of one possibility and how that might work out. And so our job as a parent is to let them see two or three other possibilities and how those might work out for them so that they have a choice between possible scenarios. And so we supply this as parents, and we hope that by doing that, as they grow up and get to be in their 20s and older, that they can do more rational decision making on their own. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So what would you say about grown-ups who behave like children when it comes to, yeah, because I've seen it, like you said that point of how children make
Mhm.
decisions emotionally and only seeing one way out of a situation,
Uh-huh.
and making
Yeah.
an emotional decision, maybe, oh, my coach doesn't like me, like, and
Hmm.
then I'm quitting the team because I don't know, like, I don't know, my friend looked at me badly or something like that. And I don't know, I've seen that, um I've seen people quit jobs because of weird reasons like that,
Hmm.
like those. And like, what would you say about adults who make decisions that way?
Well, first of all, even as adults, we all can act in a childlike way at times, and especially if we're under emotional pressure or we're scared. And so when we find ourselves kind of having a childlike reaction, those are the decision times that it's most important to ask other people for their opinions. Because if we ask someone else how they look at the situation, they'll give us more of a logical response because they're not feeling the emotions that we are in the immediate moment. And so it doesn't even have to be an expert. It can just be a friend or just someone else to ask how they would approach something like this. And that sometimes helps us be a little less emotional about it.
Yeah. No, you've just reminded me of, sometimes I have actually found myself in such a situation where I'm very emotional about something and I want to make an emotional decision. And then I have this friend of mine who they're so annoying. they will they will start analyzing every single bit what happened.
Hmm.
And then I just want to talk about at that particular point because I'm very emotional. I want to talk about my side of the story. Then they're like, but now for her, she will ask questions around the whole situation, like trying to
Hmm.
ask about the whole 360,
Yeah.
uh, how the whole 360 view of the entire situation.
Uh-huh.
And what did you say? Like, for example, if it was a hit up argument between me and a person, they'll ask me like, when they said that, what did you say? Or what did you say before they said that? So that you can, you see, like, see what role I played in that particular situation. Or
Yes.
then sometimes like she like saying like, let me be a devil's advocate and let me ask, um, what if this person was had a bad day or something bad happened that had nothing to do with you, and then maybe they rushed out on you? Will you change your feelings about that particular
Hmm.
situation? And at that point, I just wanna vent. I just wanna complain.
Uh-huh. Well,
Yeah,
that's very understandable. But what the other person is doing is a couple of things that are important in rational decision making. One is they're breaking the problem down into smaller parts. That's
yeah,
helpful. And secondly, they're looking at it from different points of view, and that's helpful. Now, to the person who has the problem, sometimes it feels like they're not getting a chance to vent. But those are parts of rational decision making where we call it the first part, we call chunking, where you chunk the problem into smaller parts and tackle each part. And looking things from a different perspective, also very important. Um, if we're helping a friend, it's probably important at first to listen and let them
yeah,
vent before we jump into solving their problem. And
yeah,
this is an area where we notice a difference between men and women. Women often will listen to each other a lot better and not offer solutions too quickly. But men, when they're talking to each other, will often interrupt as quickly as they think of a solution and give the solution to the other person. And two men talking to each other don't mind that. They accept that. But if a man is talking to a woman and she's expressing her feelings and he interrupts too quickly with a solution, she does not appreciate that. That's
yeah,
not
that's,
helpful. And so
yeah,
couples, male and female couples, will have to kind of navigate this. The, the,
mm,
the, the man has to learn not to offer solutions too quickly, and the woman learns not to just express only her emotions. So um, we could
I think
probably have a.
having that diversified friendship is really important because as much as I get annoyed at that particular time when she's doing that. The reason why I went to her is because I know she'll make me see the
Uh-huh,
right perspective.
uh-huh,
And at the same time, I also do not want to make the wrong decision based on that specific
uh-huh,
situation.
uh-huh,
Yeah, so I think
right.
it's a win-win.
And we might have a program at some point on male female relationships. And not that every male is a certain way and every female is a certain way, but there are certain differences that
Mhm.
that really come into play in relationships. So we might have a program on that. That would be fun.
Yeah, that will be fun. People love relationship questions.
Mhm. I think so. The next one I thought of when I was thinking about mental health, and this really goes along with rational decision making. Mentally
Mhm.
healthy people more accept reality. I mean, they might not like what they're seeing or the way things are, but they they are somewhat realistic in terms of accepting the reality and the things that they can't control. Because there are
Mhm.
quite a few things I know we all know in life that really we wish were different, but we can't control them. And we can't just dwell on these things constantly, or
Yeah,
we would not have any time left over to enjoy life. I mean, there are all sorts of problems and injustices in the world, and we just can't think about them all the time, like the disappearing rainforests in Brazil and the conflict in the Middle East and the earthquake in Turkey and Syria. I mean, we just can't think about those things all the time. Realistically, we have to think of, well, what choices do we have?
Yeah.
So, yeah, being realistic and accepting reality doesn't mean we have to like it, and we can still work to make the world better. But
Yeah.
accepting mainly the things that we can't change, at least today, is important.
Well, how would you advise someone who has a hard time letting go of something if they were set, if they had their mind set on something and it didn't work out, and even like the reality is that it will never work out. There are people who end up pursuing the same thing so
Mhm.
many times, and there are no other outcomes.
Mhm.
What would you say to people who struggle to let go of such situations?
That's a really good question. I think, Evelyn, that may be your best question so far, because it does happen a lot. And there are two
Yeah.
or three things we can do, I think. One is we can definitely listen to their frustration and their pain and honor it. But another thing gently we can start to bring into the picture is other possible scenarios that might be better for them. Um, we can point out that whatever it is they're frustrated with, that they've tried several different approaches and they haven't worked.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this is a tricky one because people can't change immediately just
Yeah,
because we give them a different idea.
yeah.
Where I run into this a lot is in with couples where one person has, let's say, had an affair or been unfaithful or lied or something, and it's a repeated pattern, and the other person is struggling with whether to leave the relationship or to stay in it and keep working. And sometimes, to me, as the therapist, as I listen to the story, I realize this is never going to work. But
Yeah.
the person I'm working with isn't quite ready to accept that yet. And so that's where we try to let them see other possibilities. We try to let them have confidence that a different path could be better.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it depends on how worried they are about the alternatives. But that's a very good question.
Yeah. Would you think, do you think that someone who is having a hard time letting go of a partner, they are giving them too much power and they do not believe much in themselves, and that's why it's hard for them to let go?
I think that's very well put. Yes, I think that's right. So part of our job is to help them see the power they do have.
Yeah.
Maybe helping them remember other times in their lives where they exercised power and it worked out. So to
Yeah.
remind them that they have power, but also to remind them that there are other alternatives, and they already are sensing and realizing that the one they're in right now is not working. So usually they know that. But
Yeah.
I think the issue of power and confidence is really important, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
Okay.
I That is amazing. I'm having such a good time.
Oh, good, good. I love your questions because I do think they're representative of the questions a lot of people watching our program would have.
Yeah.
And hopefully, as time goes on, people will send in their own questions. But I really
Yeah.
like the way you think of just as a normal human being, what you would wonder. Um,
Yeah.
the next one put on my list is that healthy people have a sense of social responsibility. In other words, and this is a little bit like empathy. They realize they're connected to a community of other people, a family, other people that are close or friends or whatever, and that they have kind of a sense of responsibility to those people. They're not an island unto themselves. And that is a lot like having empathy. So those are maybe almost the same thing. But yeah, healthy people give and are kind and try to improve the lives of others. Um, Not that they dedicate their whole life to that necessarily, but they're mindful that their own ultimate happiness depends really on the happiness of their community. It's hard to be really happy and healthy and successful with a family or a community around you that's miserable.
I think that is really important. A friend of mine told me that a lot of people pursue life, even career. You find you pursue your career, you pursue your like your whole life in general, with selfish motives. Like, I want that job to give me this amount of money, and then like they end up complaining because they're not making a lot of money and all that. But he gave me a different perspective of, if people worked more towards helping others, or acquiring skill sets that help people solve their problems, you actually end up even getting more money out
Mhm.
of that whole situation. You end up getting even more jobs out of that situation. You end up getting even better and healthier friendships, because you're not only thinking about yourself. Because we I feel like we are living in a world right now that basically a lot of people are just thinking about themselves, like, what I'm gonna gain, um what does this friendship help me with, like. And we're always looking for, how am I benefiting from this whole situation? Is it my job? Is it this? Instead of focusing on, what value am I adding to this person, what value am I adding to this job? And
Mhm.
if we thought in that line,
Mhm.
you will find that you are adding more value, and people will appreciate that more. And
Mhm.
your friendships will be better, your relationships will be better. Even you find that even you get even a way better job because of the value that you're adding in that company.
Right. And this, I think, Evelyn, is one that I'm glad we were talking about this because one of the points on my first list of mentally healthy people, this one is probably one of the most influenced by culture. Some
Mm.
cultures are much more oriented toward the good of everyone. Capitalism is not. Capitalism, in its raw form, is oriented toward every person trying to get the best they can for themselves. And
Mhm.
so you look at different cultures, some are much more individualistic and competitive and
Mhm.
ruthless, even, and others are much more group welfare oriented, the team, the village, the family. Um, and even different families are oriented differently. Some families, what we talked about being sensitive um, to and having a sense of social responsibility. Some families are just that's the way they raise everyone. In this
Yeah.
family, we're in it for each other, and other
Mhm.
families are really not that way. They're more individualistic, and each person for himself or herself. And so this one is very influenced by family and culture.
There's this conversation that has been going on in Africa and Kenya, and a lot of it is saying that most Africans are striving so hard to become more westernized and forgetting their culture, and they do not understand what they're losing. And what is happening right now is that, like, we're striving more to become capitalists, and like a more individualized kind of system. And what that is doing is actually killing our culture, and we're losing those values of looking out for each other, looking out for our families. And like, you find that if a family member is doing well, they don't want to help another family member, because they want to be the only family member who's driving a car, or the only family member who can buy dinner for everyone else, and such kind of conversations. And I think that it's important that you brought that out, because it is important to keep our culture, because people do not understand like what its important is.
Right. I think every culture or family offers something good. And
Yeah.
in this modern world, one of the concepts, we've talked about our overview signs of mental health, but one thing they all have in common, I think, is that each person looks for balance. So we balance everything. That's the best. So with people let's say in Kenya right now, there there's pressure toward striving and capitalism and succeeding, and but then there's our cultural background that promotes the good of the tribe and the good of the village, and so each person probably needs to have a balance of both. So I might, if I were a young person in Kenya, I might really be getting educated and becoming competitive and looking to improve my income and my status. But on the other hand, I want to honor the values of the culture from which I come. And I think
Yeah.
it's in a lot of areas of mental health, balance and moderation are the two words that you hear over and over again. Whatever the
Yeah.
topic may be, it's balance and
And
moderation.
and I think that's really important because also we do have some cultures that are really on the extreme when it comes to um like I don't know, messing you up when it comes to mental health, and a lot of cultural practices are causing a lot of mental health issues.
Hmm.
For example, like we do still have some cultures that are uh, practicing FGM, and I don't know whether you know what FGM is.
Not really. What is it?
It's female genital
Oh yeah,
mutilation.
yeah, yes.
Uh,
Right, that's what
so
I thought you
we
meant.
do have some of the cultures that are still practicing FGM, early marriages to young girls,
Hmm.
and also like refusing to educate their girls, of which it has really reduced. It's not as bad as it was before.
Uh huh.
So sometimes you find that like maybe if a girl really wants, or not just a girl, if someone wants to advance themselves and become more educated and help the community to make more rational decisions, and it's against the community's point of view, they are viewed to be more like a rebel. And I think that the point that you have brought out of trying to balance between culture and your education and everything else is really
Yes.
important.
It's very difficult. And I think
Yeah.
the other dynamic that's probably happening in Africa is urbanization. So many more young people probably are living in cities and
Yeah.
coming to, even in the United States, this is happening. People from rural areas are moving more to cities. That's where the jobs are, that's where possibilities are.
Mhm.
And then when you move there, you run into people from so many different backgrounds, and it
Yeah.
challenges your old beliefs and your ties to your own upbringing and your own culture. And that's a struggle. I don't
Yeah.
have easy answers for that. It's not something that there's a solution to, but definitely we have to recognize it.
Yeah.
Another
I think
area would be
that
marriage.
alone deserves its own show.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, no, I
I
think
think
that's
we need
right.
to recognize some of the people who have been watching. I've seen we have several comments.
Okay,
Yeah.
can you tell me what they are?
I want to try and I'm putting them on the screen. Nyukabi Kameno is my friend, my dear friend, and I don't know whether she'll appreciate me saying this. She is my rational friend. She's the friend I was talking about.
I'm
And
glad you
I'm so happy that she's watching, and thank you so much for watching and saying hi. She's just saying hi.
have.
And we have the other comment is Vicky Mushai. That's my aunt. Oh my God. Like she's saying hi to us both. Thank you for watching as well. And uh a lot of the other comments are from Yokabi. I think she was just commenting on Or maybe that is the comment she was talking about, like when I was talking about her.
Oh,
Surely. Yeah.
mhm.
That is her as well. That is also my auntie. She's saying that this is so educative.
Uh-huh.
Thank you so much. Um, Milkabi is laughing. I think that is when I was talking about her as well. This is Kelly. Kelly is one of my band members. Thank you so much for he saying that this is good vibes. Thank you so much for watching, guys. You can ask questions based on what we've talked
Mhm.
about, and as you
And
can see,
also you can ask questions in between our programs. Um,
yeah,
Evelyn will have a way of collecting those questions, and she'll let me know what they are, and we can be
yeah,
thinking about them before our next program. So
yeah.
please, yes, um, and even people who are not friends and family of Evelyn can watch the program.
Yeah, that is true. We're trying to, you guys can share to as many people as possible. And I am so grateful that I have good friends
Uh-huh.
and also the family is watching, and that is amazing.
You know,
Um,
one topic in the future, I think, would be how to handle conflict in relationships, like with good friends or spouses, or because there always is conflict of some sort, and it can be healthy, but if it's
mhm.
only if it's really handled in a constructive way. So I think one of our programs should be on um, fair fighting, so to speak, or handling conflict in an intimate relationship.
You've just reminded me, like I was talking to another friend during the weekend, and he was telling us how he grew up in such a healthy household. And I remember the people we were with in the conversation, most of them were shocked because he was saying that the dad used to put, like, if he and his brother were fighting over something, the dad will take them to the living room, and he will tell them that I am not going to get involved in your fight, but I'm giving you 30 minutes to discuss about what exactly happened,
Mhm.
and also try and take responsibility for the part that you took in that whole argument, and also come up with solutions on how you're going to solve this. And then I'm going to come after 30 minutes and see where you are at in this
Uh-huh.
conversation.
Yeah.
And then 30 minutes later, if they haven't come up with a solution, the dad is gonna listen to what happened, and they, like, of which most of the time they will have already come up with a solution because they knew there's no way out of this whole situation
Right.
until we get to listen to the other person's point of view.
That's
And
good.
one of the things he was saying is that most of our fights come from um, miscommunication and only viewing situations based on our own perspective. And
Uh-huh.
I thought that he was so lucky
Uh-huh.
that he was so lucky to have grown up in a family like that.
Well, apart even from the technique, there's just the recognition that conflict happens and it can be solved. And so
Yeah.
that's providing, and we'll go into that in our meeting on that, because there are certain very helpful rules about fair fighting or
Mhm.
arguing, and they're very very helpful.
Yeah.
I'm looking. We have 10 minutes left. Should we
Mhm.
talk about a few more
Yeah, we
issues of
should.
for mental healthy people, or how do you want to spend that
Yeah.
last time?
I think we should talk about a few more because
Okay.
we don't have any more um questions or comments.
And these are on the website too. But
Yeah.
so the next section are just some more things that we can look for in ourselves to see, are we, how healthy are we? Are we acting in a mentally healthy way?
I
Um,
think we missed one.
excuse me?
I think we missed one on the previous section.
Well,
Absence
I
of
think I mentioned that in the beginning. The with mental
oh,
health, of
yeah,
course,
yeah,
one would
true.
be the absence of an actual mental health problem,
Yeah,
depression or anxiety. But even a person with a mental health issue like depression or anxiety can act in
mhm,
a mentally healthy way in all the other respects. They can have
yeah,
empathy. Um, they can have a sense of meaning, and so, but they wouldn't be completely content until they've really address that mental health problem if they have one. And we can have
Yeah.
maybe a program at some point about specific mental health diagnoses like depression or anxiety or schizophrenia or whatever it might be. And some people might be interested in some of those particular ones. Attention deficit disorder is a very problematic, common thing people are concerned about now. But that, yeah, that was the other one in the first section. The
Mm.
next one in the things we can look for in ourselves are, the first one is showing kindness, generosity, tolerance, and patience. These are actually this is one of my favorites because these are the four things that I'm working on almost, every day, trying to be better in my life. I want to be, these are things I value a lot myself personally. And whenever I see it in another person, it moves me greatly. I just really am moved by it. A good example of this would be the Dalai Lama. If anybody's familiar with the Tibetan Dalai Lama, he's just an exceptionally good person in every way. So, yeah, kindness, generosity, tolerance, and patience. Patience is the one that's hardest for me. Um, so
I
I've,
think my tolerance.
excuse me,
I think mine is tolerance,
oh,
especially,
tolerance.
yeah, especially understanding that people are not perfect
Hmm.
and they can make mistakes, and that is okay.
Hmm.
I think I didn't realize how,
Evelyn, does that include yourself? You can
yeah, I think it includes myself as well.
be tolerant
Because,
of your own mistakes.
yeah, I think I'm too hard on myself when I do make a
Uh
mistake.
huh. Uh huh.
But but I'm working on it, and I think right now I'm a bit better at it.
Uh huh. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that would be one thing. If we have those elements in our life, it isn't just good for others that we have it. It makes us happier and more resilient and well within ourselves. Um,
Yeah.
the next one we actually were talking about it just a minute ago, expressing anger constructively. So it's important, especially in intimate relationships, to express anger, but there are many ways of doing it. Some are very destructive, excuse me, and some are more constructive. And so I think we could have a program on that. But that would be
Yeah.
another thing. People who
Yeah.
come to me for therapy and they say, I never get angry, or they say, in our marriage we've never had an argument. That's not good. Those are not good comments. Those mean things that are important have been suppressed and
Yeah.
swept under the carpet and avoided, and so it's not a good thing.
Yeah.
Um, the next one there um, is not, and this is a little bit related to what you were saying, not being overly critical of ourselves or others. That's a hard one for me too, because I do tend to be critical in the sense that I notice things that shouldn't be the way they are.
Yeah. Me
But
too.
but do I? Is it my job to feel upset about that or try to make it different, or I've got to really control my reaction to it? Sometimes we can't control seeing it in the first place. Like, let's say we see somebody who's rude to us. Well, we
Yeah.
can't help noticing it, but we can't, what we can work on is reacting emotionally to it, because there are rude, unfair, unjust things everywhere, and we don't want to always be reacting emotionally to those things. We only have a certain amount of energy. We have to protect it.
Yeah.
Um, Pursuing and enjoying our own interests. Now, we can't do this all the time, but
Yeah.
definitely healthy people, at least some place in their life, they're pursuing something that's enjoyable. If they're not at all, that's something to work on.
I used to feel guilty when I do something that makes me happy.
Uh-huh.
And I know a lot of people feel that way. Like you feel guilty every time you do something that's making you happy.
Why do you think that
Or
now?
anytime that you're happy, you feel guilty. Or you feel like I don't know, it's like is it possible to be addicted to pain?
I'm not sure I understood what you said. Why do you think when you look back on it, Evelyn, that you had that reaction of feeling
I
guilty when
think
you were
when
happy?
you is it possible for someone to be addicted to pain?
Oh, oh,
Yeah,
oh.
as when you're used to things going wrongly all the time. So every time something good is happening, like I will wait for a shoe to drop. Like, okay, what gives? Like I'm waiting for something bad to happen.
It seems like maybe when you do something where you're happy and then you feel guilty, that really
Yeah,
guilty is actually more of a it's a cover for afraid.
yeah,
Afraid
I
that
think
you might
it's
lose that happy feeling or that it might not happen again.
oh,
Or
I don't want to get too comfortable in
yeah,
it, then get disappointed when
so
something bad
guilty
happens.
might be really more of really an expression of anxiety or fear.
Yeah.
That's another program that we should have, that some emotions are actually primary emotions like joy and fear. But other emotions like guilt or embarrassment or are complex emotions made up of building blocks of basic emotions. For
Mm.
example, lots of men will get angry when they're really afraid of something. That's very common with men, especially. And so if they deal with it as though it's an anger problem, they it never gets solved because really it's a fear problem. And so sometimes in
And
my
most of
therapy,
the time, they get angry because they don't want people to realize that they are afraid, because
uh,
men don't like to be viewed as
well,
afraid of something.
yes, and anger is a stronger emotion. Fear feels like a weaker and more vulnerable emotion,
Yeah.
whereas anger is more energizing and it feels stronger and more invulnerable. And so, but it isn't the real emotion in those situations. So that's an interesting one where you feel you're happy and then you feel guilt, at least apprehension, like something, this is not good. I shouldn't feel this happy.
That is very interesting.
Mhm,
Like, I've never thought of it that way. Like,
mhm.
especially on that perspective of men react in anger when they're afraid. I didn't.
Uh-huh. This is very common. I've done it myself many times. Um,
I
so
think
and sometimes women, it's the other way. They'll act hurt when really they're angry. The better emotion to go with would be anger and assertiveness, but hurt is safer, so to speak. This could be another interesting show.
ah, I think that will be amazing.
Hmm.
I like how eye-opening this whole conversation
Oh,
is,
sure. Yeah.
and we have a lot to talk about. I think we'll have to do a part two
Mhm.
of sense of mental health, because we are not
Yes.
able
Yes.
to
Yeah.
deal with we were not able to cover all
Right.
the points that we wrote in our article. If you haven't read the article, I will keep sharing the link to our blog post, Mind to Mind. Read the article, ask as many questions as you can, and yeah, I think we should wrap up the show, Dr. Claiborne. What do you think?
I do want to say one thing, Evelyn, here at the end. I think this show is revealing two things. First of all, how normal you are, in
Yeah,
terms of being representative of just the way a person is. I
yeah.
really respect that. And the other is, you're also very insightful. You obviously, even as a young person, you have thought about these things a lot. And I think your sensitivity and insight and your willingness to be open are real assets to this type of show. So I really appreciate you doing
I
that.
am very shocked that I was able to share some of, yeah, I'm becoming more open, and I like that about myself.
Mhm.
And thank you for also recognizing and appreciating me. I also appreciate you so much because you are sharing wells. I don't know, like you have been in this industry for such a long time, and you have a lot of knowledge. You've met so many people, and you are freely sharing what you know with
Mhm.
us, and we are so grateful.
Well,
And I
it's good
am
for
so
me too.
excited, looking forward to more shows. I don't know why we decided to do a bi-weekly show. This should be a weekly show.
Anyway,
Yeah.
thanks a lot for all of you who are listening and watching today. And please send us your questions.
Yeah. Thank you so much, guys. Keep sharing. The videos are still available on all the three platforms: Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. You can ask as many questions as you can. If you have specific topics that you'd like us to discuss,
Mhm.
you can send them to us, and we can curate the topics as we continue um, doing the show. Thank you so much for watching. We are grateful. Until next time. Bye bye.
Bye.